This week on the Steele Report.
Now she is coming back and trying to say, I support this, I support that, proposing these fake bills that she knows has no chance of passing.
Now from KWWL, this is the Steele Report.
And welcome to this week's edition of the Steele Report. Today on the program, another of our Eastern Iowa congressional candidate interviews. Remember last week we had Dr. Marionette Miller Meeks, the Republican incumbent in the 1st District. This week, her challenger in a rematch from 2 years ago, and that is Democrat Christina Bohannan. She is a former state representative, wife and mother. She's been an environmental engineer, a lawyer, constitutional law expert, and law professor at the University of Iowa College of Law. I understand you were first in your class in law school. So my first question is, what's it like to be the smartest person in the room?
I'm not sure I still know that, but no, it's one of these things that, I know what it's like to teach, to talk to our students about democracy, about the brilliance of our country and our Constitution. I've been doing that. I've taught, over 1,500 students, our sons and daughters here in Iowa, and have sent them out to, I think, good jobs, and that feels like $1 million. So I love doing it, but I'm in this for them. Because the truth is that our young people deserve a bright future. We want to make Iowa the kind of place that they want to stay and build families and call home. So I'm excited to do this.
So if money talks, you should win this race pretty easily. You have outpaced your opponent by quite a number. In fact, I think I saw a release here in the last few days that you set a record of $1.87 million in the third quarter. So you have a lot of people in your corner. Are you beholden to anyone? No,
and that's what I'm most proud of, honestly, because the people who are supporting me are flesh and blood human beings. I mean, what a concept, We've got so many human beings, so many voters in Iowa who are excited about this campaign. And, that's the difference between me and Marionette Miller Meeks, is when you look at the people who are supporting me, they are Iowans, they are in this district, because I do, in fact, live in the district, unlike my opponent. But also, she has so much support from corporate PACs, corporate CEOs, special interests. That's where her money comes from. My money comes from carpenters and building trades, steel workers, nurses and teachers right here in our district. So that's what's the most exciting to me.
But also some money from the Democratic Congressional campaign folks too, right?
Yeah, so, that always happens, right? She's got that money, we've got that money. Any competitive race is going to have some of that party money, and I appreciate that. But what I'm most proud of is our grassroots support from hardworking people right here in the district.
Appears your entire campaign is built on the reproductive rights issue. There are many other issues that people are concerned about, but I want to get your stance very clear. And I've already talked to your opponent, who says, yes, I do favor exceptions, and she said that. Your ads say she does not, but where are you on this, and where is she, from your viewpoint?
Yeah. Look, this is an issue that is so hard for a lot of people, and I know that people have strong feelings about it, but we need to have a balance, right? And that's what we had for a very long time. And recently, after the Supreme Court overruled Roe versus Wade, we started seeing all of these states enact these very strict, very extreme abortion bans. Iowa now has one of the strictest in the country. Marionette Miller Meeks supported that 6-week ban when she ran for the state Senate. In fact, Kim Reynolds, endorsed her, saying that Miller Meeks was a champion for her 6-week ban. But she didn't stop there. When she got to Congress, she co-sponsored a life at conception bill that is, in fact, a national abortion ban with no exceptions at all. There's no exceptions for rape, incest, or to save a woman's life. And look, you don't have to take my word for it.
I know,
because multiple newspapers, TV stations right here in Iowa have all done fact checks on this issue and have said that Miller Meeks did support the life at conception bill, and that is truly a national ban with no exceptions. So of course she's going to say what she's going to say in an election year. She knows that she is very much out of step with Iowans on this, and that this is an important issue that affects over half of our population. information directly and everybody indirectly. So I understand that she is now trying to backtrack and mislead people about her position, but her record is very clear and it's very extreme, and every just about news outlet here in Southeast Iowa and in the state have said that that has been her position. My position is that women have to be able to make these decisions for themselves. This is a highly personal, I can't imagine an issue that is more personal to people than whether, when, how to have a child. And I think that to have an abortion is a very difficult issue. I hope that my 22-year-old daughter never, ever has to be in that position. But we know that women need to be able to make that decision. And I'll tell you, since all this has started happening, I have heard from so many women in Southeast Iowa who have had these stories of, ectopic pregnancies that required a termination procedure, that without it, this person could have died or wouldn't have been able to have a child afterward. These are highly individual circumstances that require, doctors to kind of weigh in on this. A lot of women desperately want a child, but it doesn't work out. There are complications. We have to leave this to women and their doctors to make these decisions. And it's not just about abortion. That's another thing that I think is so important to point out. This is not just about abortion. If we want to end abortions or reduce them, let's talk about birth control. Let's let people have that option. Marionette Miller Meeks voted against a bill in Congress that would have guaranteed people the right to use birth control. And so in her opinion, it would be fine if states around the country wanted to ban birth control. She could have voted to give a federal right to that so that states couldn't take that away from people, but she chose not to. And then there's IVF, in vitro fertilization. Again, same thing. That national ban that we just talked about, the Life at Conception bill, that would actually make IVF impossible. It would open up doctors and healthcare providers to being prosecuted for doing things that they have to do in the course of IVF to help people have a child. And that is very personal to me because I did IVF fertility treatments. And it was a grueling process. I don't think any woman would tell you that that is an easy process, but it helps so many people have children who desperately want a family. And so, I don't understand why Marionette Miller Meeks would sign on to a bill that would make IVF impossible. She even then afterwards, she said, that she would not sign on to a bill that would again guarantee the right of IVF. She refused to sign on to that bill. And now after all of that, after years of being against reproductive freedom, not just abortion, but birth control, IVF, all of it, she has been a champion on the other side of this. Now she is coming back and trying to say, I support this, I support that, proposing these fake bills that she knows has no chance of passing to make it look like she's more moderate on this issue than she is here at election time. I think that's wrong.
She believes the economy is the top issue. So where do you stand on that? We have a high inflation rate that has come down, but the prices have not come down. What is your answer to lowering prices, making things a little bit more affordable so people can buy a home and not have to just bankrupt themselves at the gas pump? Yeah.
The economy is huge. It is absolutely one of the top issues in this election. Prices are too high. People are struggling with that. I was telling somebody the other day, my husband is a big potato chip guy. We have way too many bags of potato chips in my house. And he came over to me the other day and showed me a bag of Ruffles. He said, $7.29 for this bag of Ruffles potato chips, So look, and that's just the tip of the iceberg, right? So that's just a big deal in my household because of the number of chips that he buys. But, here, look, we've got the price of eggs, the price of groceries, the price of gas. We've got to bring those prices down, but it means having somebody in Congress who will actually put that issue first, instead of putting corporate donors first. Because look, these corporations, they make their profits by giving us high prices. That's how that works. And Marionette Miller Meeks has consistently taken hundreds of thousands of dollars from these corporations and then voted to keep their profits up and our prices high. $150,000 from big oil she has taken. And then she voted against a bill that would hold big oil accountable for price gouging at the gas pump. That is a fact. She's taken over $250,000 from the big pharmaceutical companies and then voted against letting Medicare negotiate for lower drug prices on a list of 10 drugs that I will tell you people in this district know by name. Every time I mention them, people will raise their hands, say, yes, I take that, or my wife takes that. You know, and then she took money from a group of insulin manufacturers on the very same day that she voted against capping the price of insulin for our seniors. That is not about left or right politics. That's just wrong. You know, and so over and over again, she talks a lot about bringing prices down. But every time she votes, she is voting to keep those prices up because she is siding with the corporations and the special interests instead of us. Here's what I want to do. I want to hold corporations accountable for price gouging at the pump, on our groceries, all of it. I know what it's like to struggle with what gets put in the grocery cart. You know, when I was growing up, I grew up in a town of about 700 in a mobile home. Neither of my parents had graduated high school. My dad was a construction worker. My mom worked part-time in a daycare. And then at one point, he got sick and they canceled his health insurance. And when that happened, we couldn't afford his prescription drugs. And as a result, you know, we lost everything trying to save him. And we were making very hard choices for a long time there about whether to fill his prescriptions or fill the grocery cart. I know what that's like. And I am sick of seeing Marionette Miller Meeks talk about reducing costs for working families, but then go to Washington, D.C. and do exactly the opposite. I will hold corporations accountable. I will work to lower prices, expand the middle class. I want to see a middle class tax cut, not a tax cut for the top 1% and the corporations. I want to see a middle class tax cut, including a child tax credit expansion that could result in an additional $1,800 a year for families with kids. That's what I want to do when I'm in Congress.
And we'll continue our interview this week with Democratic challenger Christina Bohannan in just a moment. And welcome back to this week's edition of the Steele Report. Right now, let's continue our interview in the 1st District race for Congress with Democratic challenger Christina Bohannan. What is the answer to getting that new farm bill finally passed? And that we know a lot of people in Congress just don't care about Midwest farmers at all, or farmers in general.
Yeah, well, you're right. And look, the way we get that farm bill passed is to elect new people to Congress, because this Congress has had this entire year to get that farm bill done, and they have failed to do it, and that includes Marionette Miller Meeks. You know, look, she said just the other day, they're not going to get it done. They're not going to get it done before the election. Now they have left Washington, D.C. They've come home to campaign. I'm sure they will tell people how great they are doing for farmers and families here, but they have failed to pass this farm bill, and that is job one for any Iowa representative, is to get that done. You know, the fact is, we have to pass a farm bill because that is what helps our farmers get ahead. It is what helps our farmers to compete with big ag. And it also affects our prices for food, right? If we don't get that farm bill done, if we don't help farmers, their costs go up, our food costs go up.
What was your reaction when former President Donald Trump the other day basically threatened a company like John Deere with tariffs if they move any more production to countries like Mexico?
Yeah, well, what I'll tell you is that I was very disappointed when I saw that John Deere had cut jobs here in Iowa. They have cut a lot of jobs here in Iowa. They have moved a lot overseas while raking in a record-breaking $7 billion in profits, and they gave $7 billion in stock buybacks to help their shareholders, you know, the wealthiest people among us. We have to get back to Iowa companies that care about our workers. And I was very, very disappointed to see that. And I would like to see policy that encourages, you know, manufacturing and companies right here. You know, Representative Miller Meeks, for example, she voted against a bill that would bring great manufacturing jobs back to the United States, including like semiconductor manufacturing. Those are some good jobs in semiconductor manufacturing, and Iowa would be a great place to do it. And so she voted against bringing those jobs back, and voted against the kind of infrastructure, that bipartisan infrastructure bill that Iowa's benefiting from, that's creating great jobs and that is creating the kinds of infrastructure that will invite companies to come and settle here and create good jobs right here in Iowa. We got to have people who are thinking about all of that and thinking about putting our workers first.
In your opinion, has Iowa gone a little bit too far to the right?
Well, I think what we're seeing is that a number of people, including Republicans, Independents, and Democrats, are very unhappy with some of the policies that they're seeing in Iowa at the state level and at the federal level. And I do think a lot of people feel that the state has just swung a bit too far the other way. Education. This voucher bill that Iowa Republicans have passed gives over $1 billion, a billion with a B, dollars of taxpayer money to private schools at the expense of our public schools. They're being underfunded. And I have been out in some of our rural counties, our smaller towns, and Republicans, teachers, principals, school board members are telling me it is devastating their schools. And when our schools go, our communities go. And so there are a lot of people who are really unhappy with that, as well as with the extreme abortion ban and a number of the other things that we're seeing, the Iowa Republicans do here. Miller Meeks has been supportive of all of it, every bit of it. In fact, on this education issue, she actually not only supports the voucher bill here in Iowa, she supported a voucher bill in Congress that would be a nationwide private school voucher bill 10 times bigger than the one Iowa is doing here. That is not what Iowans want. Iowans love our public schools. It has been a priority and a source of pride for us here in Iowa going back. So many people can remember when Iowa was #1 in education. Every time I talk about this, huge rounds of applause. People are so nostalgic for that time in Iowa when we were #1 in public education, and we can be that again. But we have to elect people who will put our public schools and our kids first.
The border situation, what should be done there? What do you feel about immigration and reform?
Yeah, we've got to secure our border. We just have to. Democrats, Independents, Republicans all agree we have to secure our border. Every country secures their border. We are no different. It has been a crisis there for a while now. It's gotten a little better in the last few months. I was one of the earliest people to say that President Biden was way too slow in acting to secure the border. But here's the thing. Congress bears the primary responsibility to secure the border. Legally, that is just a fact. That's how that works. And we have politicians in Congress who have been talking about securing the border for years and years, maybe decades, and have done nothing about it. And Mariannette Miller Meeks talks a lot about immigration. She has lost all credibility to talk about securing the border because there was an opportunity, a golden opportunity, just not long ago, a year ago or so, to secure the border. It was the strictest security measure, maybe that this country has ever seen. It was the bill that Border Patrol said they wanted and needed. They endorsed it. They said, this is what we need to secure the border and to keep fentanyl from coming into our country. But Mariannette Miller Meeks and her colleagues wouldn't even bring it to a vote. Why? Because they wanted to keep playing politics with it. They wanted to make it a campaign issue. They wanted to keep saying this is a problem rather than actually solving the problem.
Where do you stand with Israel?
Yeah, gosh, it's been so hard. Watching all of this from October 7th forward has been so difficult. The devastation on both sides, the loss of life. When Hamas attacked Israel, the accounts of the violence, including sexualized violence against women, made me sick. It is hard to imagine more cruelty than that. And then, of course, afterward, there was this response, and now we have 40,000 dead in Gaza. It is all absolutely devastating to watch. And now, of course, Iran launched these missiles into Israel, and there's going to be a response from that. It is increasingly becoming a very, very dangerous situation for the entire Midwest region. I do support Israel's right to defend itself. I am concerned about the escalation of the violence there, and we will have to watch this very, very closely going forward because it's a very troubling situation.
And as far as additional aid from the United States to Ukraine?
Yeah, look, there should not be a blank check for any country for aid from the United States. I mean, we have to take that on a case-by-case basis. We have to see what makes sense, see, what's going on in the region and what makes sense, what strategically makes sense and economically makes sense. Look, I think that's an ongoing question, and we have to decide that on a case-by-case basis. I will say that there's a munitions plant right here in this district that is producing a lot of the artillery shells that are being used in Ukraine. It's not all, just kind of money going out. I mean, there are things that we are doing here, not that we should do it for that reason, but just to say that economically, there are some things flowing into the district from that. But that's just going to be an evolving, very fluid situation that we're going to have to watch at all times, keeping our own interests and economic interests in mind, as well as the safety and security of people in Ukraine.
A health crisis can bankrupt a family.
This is something that's very personal to me. My dad got sick, and he had emphysema for about 10 years. And just as he got really sick, they canceled his health insurance. And when that happened, you're talking about the Affordable Care Act. He then had a pre-existing condition. He lost his old insurance. He couldn't get new insurance because he had this pre-existing condition. And we lost everything trying to afford the prescription drugs that it took to save his life. The Affordable Care Act ended that problem. The Affordable Care Act created protection for people with pre-existing conditions. Insurance companies can't discriminate any longer against people like my dad and the hardworking people of this district. So I support the Affordable Care Act and its protection for people with pre-existing conditions. And there are real efforts to repeal it. Republicans in Congress are still talking about wanting to repeal the Affordable Care Act. Marionette Miller Meeks was one of the biggest opponents of the Affordable Care Act when it was going through. She railed against it for years. So there are real efforts now to try to repeal that. I think that's a real threat.
As we wrap this up, why you, why now?
Yeah, people all across Southeast Iowa are telling me that they are just tired of politics as usual. They are tired of politicians that seem like they are more concerned with getting ahead or, what money they're bringing in or, being on TV, no offense, than they are about representing the people of that they took an oath to represent. People have lost faith in our government. They've lost faith in the idea that their representatives are there to actually represent them rather than just fighting with each other or trying to score political points. We need to get back to the simple idea that we go to Congress to represent the people and to try to make their lives better. I know what it's like to work hard and still struggle to put food on the table. I know what it's like for one, illness or accident to pull the rug out from under a hardworking family. It happened to me when my dad got sick and they canceled his insurance. I am working hard to bring down healthcare costs for everybody, to lower food and gas prices for everybody. I want to make sure people have the freedom to decide what happens to their own bodies and their own futures. We have a great opportunity here in Iowa to, reinstill confidence in our government. And that's what I'm going to do when I go to Congress. And I want to say, that whether people vote for me or not, I will still represent them, whether they are in my party, whether they vote for me, whether they ever talk to me or not. I am going to represent them because I am tired, and they are tired, of a brand of politics where people, representatives think that they are only there to represent their base. My base is every single person in this district, and I will represent them to the best of my ability, regardless of whether I ever meet them or they ever vote for me.
And a big thank you to Democratic challenger in the 1st District, Christina Bohannan. Remember, we had her opponent.
But I have worked very hard for this district, one, being accessible in the district.
The incumbent Republican Congresswoman, Dr. Marionette Miller Meeks, on the program last week, and that's available still on kwwl.com. Stick around, we'll be wrapping things up for this week in just a moment. And welcome back as we wrap up another edition of the Steele Report with a reminder that we will continue our congressional candidate interviews next week, and our guest will be the incumbent Republican in the 2nd District of Iowa, and that is Ashley Hinson. We had her opponent, Democratic challenger Sarah Corkery, on this program a few weeks ago, and that interview is still available right now on kwwl.com. But next week, it's Congresswoman Ashley Hinson. Again, thanks for watching. We'll see you here next week.